Welcome to Front End First. This is our third time trying to get this going, so we're going to skip the intros this time. We have a bit of a gloomy day here in New York, and these old buildings sometimes like to get a little finicky when the weather's not good. They just get resentful of like, I don't know, they're just like, humans, get off of this island. We don't want to deal with you. And so to punish us, they slow down our internet.
That is exactly what's happening.
So that's happened to us twice. But we're going to try to get this recorded because it's been quite a few weeks since we've had an episode. And we actually got to meet a lot of listeners at ReactConf, which was a lot of fun. I think my most common thing people came up to me and said that they liked was the podcast, which was really cool. And people like my YouTube video. People recognize me from YouTube and stuff, but people like the podcast. We've heard this for years. People feel like it's water cooler banter at work. It's like the office chatter just about like what people are working on. So glad that resonates, and we miss that too. I know I miss that from bigger companies and being in person and everything. So it's fun that we get to share that with everybody. Today we have a bunch of things on our backlog, but we want to start with view transitions, which is something Ryan's been playing around with in a demo, and I'm excited to hear about. So yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about view transitions?
Yeah. I have been using them in a React 19 app, and the way that they work with React is just awesome. So let me get into it.
Yeah, that's cool. And I just to help tee you off here, I remember you were saying usually that's not the case. Usually it feels like some browser APIs like set timeout. You can't just drop that into React the way you think.
Yeah.
So it's nice to hear that this plays pretty well with it.
I will say, well, since you brought that up, I will say this might be a little more closer to set timeout where it seems frustrating that you can't just drop set timeout into React, but then when you get your use timeout hook working and you see all the things it gets to do, you're like, oh, this is so awesome. I have like a declarative version of a timeout, and I can change the delay time or the function, and everything just works. So, yeah, there's
you have to
understand
you have to understand React in order to make the binding, to wrap the imperative APIs that are new with the declarative interface with React, whatever that is. But once you do that, then it's all good. So why don't you start with just what the heck is this API? Is it a CSS API? Is it a JavaScript API? Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's both. There's a JavaScript component and a CSS component. The idea behind this API is that, we're often transitioning between pages in our web apps, whether it's a SPA or an MPA, and you want to provide some sort of animation as you go between pages. And I have only, since I'm a React developer, I have only worked with the SPA version of view transitions. So that involves like calling JavaScript. I have not used, but there is an MPA version where like you just drop, I think it was a meta tag and now it's like a CSS class, but you drop a CSS class or CSS property into your CSS file, and then you'll have transitions as you like click links in, you can imagine just like as between HTML files. So no SPA, no nothing. So it's pretty cool to see the browser thinking about this and thinking about an SPA transition that just selectively like updates parts of the page, and then like a browser navigation that just downloads a whole new document. Those will be using the same animation APIs, which is I love that because it just is going to carry over between all the apps we build. So
yeah, that's great. It reminds me of, we were just talking about, we were doing some work with streams this week, and we talked about the fetch API and how it came to the browser and brought kind of a standard request response object, and the response can be a stream and you can read it and stuff. And we didn't have that for a long time, but that was pretty cool. That it accommodated streams, and it was made before ChatGPT, but it's still, the browser really does. You made this great point that when fetch first came out, it was like really clunky to use. It felt clunky. It was strange that you had to await the response.json. It was strange that 500 responses don't throw in the promise like you would expect them to. And instead they mark the OK property to be false. But I think Fetch has panned out to be a very flexible and versatile API. And we saw that when we were playing with the streams response from, ChatGPT last week.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And so
when you're coming from like Node.js, which has like the request package, and sorry, it just did the thing. I think
it's okay.
Talking over each other. Okay, cool. Yeah, so when you're coming from Node.js, which has like the request package, and you just do like let JSON equals request, some URL, and it just your JSON is just there, and then you go to use the Fetch API, you're like, oh, what is all this? I don't even understand why all this exists. And then after a few years, it's like, oh wow, this thing supports streaming. All of a sudden, like streaming is popular because of these AI APIs. So yeah, yes. I feel like when the browser adds an API, at least for the last few years, like they've considered so many cases. So if it feels clunky or it feels off or it feels bad, I think there's like an interim period where people they write wrapper libraries to make that easy. But I think that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about view transitions, because the fact that I'm seeing the browser add this is them saying like, we have an answer that's going to work for every type of app. And yeah, that really excites me.
That's super exciting. I mean, even React itself has talked about adding primitives for these kinds of things, because libraries like Framer Motion have basically had to go around, the React model and sometimes reach into private APIs. It was the same in Ember. When we saw Ember animated, they had to reach into private APIs because they never got around to it. So and I agree with you that the last 10 years, I would say, especially 5, of browser APIs being introduced has bought a lot of trust with me, with you, with a lot of us. Whereas in the past, it was like, no, we're not going to wait for any of this stuff. Whereas now it's kind of like, actually, maybe it's just worth waiting for this stuff because they've earned a lot of trust, and the APIs they've added have panned out. So that's cool. That's a great point. So tell us a little bit about it. What does it actually look like to work with?
Yeah, so you have this problem where like you're updating the screen, and as soon as you do an update, you blow away the old content. So how do you do animation? It's like almost like you need to have like 2 versions of your app rendered to be able to animate between them. But that's really hard. These frameworks aren't built to do that. So view transitions, they try to do that for you. And the way they do that for you is when you kick off a view transition. I'll just talk about it at a high level, then we'll kind of get into like the details. But at a high level, when you kick off a view transition, you're going to take a screenshot of the current page that you're viewing. And the browser is basically going to freeze that screenshot on, that's what you're going to look at. That's what your eyes see. And then it's going to do all its DOM updates. Again, I'm using the SPA version of view transition. So it's just going to do a bunch of DOM updates. And then it's going to, when the live version of the page is ready, it's going to do a bunch of DOM updates. We're going to call that like the live version of the page.
Right.
And
the current app, the new UI is ready or whatever.
The new UI, but it's doing those like underneath the screenshot. Like you can think of it as like a screenshot of the old view, and then it's doing its updates underneath. And then when they're ready, you're going to do whatever transition between those, the screenshot as well as the live view, the thing that's underneath it. And so by default, the browser is going to do a crossfade. It's like it's just a very, very simple crossfade. So it's pretty cool. You like opt into view transitions, and all of a sudden you're like clicking links in your app, and they're just
all of them crossfading.
They're just crossfading between them.
That's cool.
The really neat thing about this is that when you define a view transition, you basically give an element an ID. So it's like, you give it a header, video player. You can think of them like layout IDs from Framer Motion.
Okay.
And then there is a, I don't know how much detail I want to go into here, but you basically have a way to style that ID in CSS. So there's what do you call the like? It's not. It's like pseudo selector.
Yeah.
So there's a
colon,
pseudo selector. Yeah, exactly.
Like
There's
before
a
and
pseudo
after.
Exactly. So there's a view transition pseudo selector, and then you pass in that ID. So we'll say like video player or header or whatever, and then you can do like nesting underneath that, and you're going to have a few elements. So you're going to have like the old element, which is like that screenshot I talked about. You're going to have a new element, which is going to be that live view. And then so you can define the animations on each of those. So you can have like the old element fade out slowly, or you can have the old element swipe to the left and the new element come in from the right.
So you
it's pretty
define
cool that-
you define animations. So you would do like a keyframes, like an at keyframes animation.
Exactly.
And so you could say move like X, like translate X 100%, and it would swipe off the screen. And then the second one, you would do an animation, and you could swipe it in from the right of the screen, and you could delay it so that it comes in after the first, something like that. You're just writing.
Exactly.
Okay.
At that point, you are writing CSS animations. You're in your CSS file.
Got you.
And you have these two actual elements that you get to apply the animations to.
I see. So I have a question. So you said the screenshot of the old app. Is it like inert? Is it like actually like a sprite, like a JPEG, or is it a DOM? Like you can hover over it and like it's the same. Like you can mess around with it.
So I've been trying to like find the answer to this of like what exactly it is. In the docs, they keep saying like a snapshot is a term they use a lot. They say like think of it as a screenshot. They have a really interesting demo where they have a video playing, and then they're clicking around and they're like moving the video player across pages. Like you can almost imagine like YouTube, and then it like moves down to like a picture-in-picture player. And in the demo, they say like, you didn't notice this, but if we slow down the animation timing, the video actually stops.
Really? It pauses during
like
the animation?
It's like, well, it's like, because it's like a screenshot. So, so I think it is correct to think of it as like an inert screenshot.
So in that case, like, is the video like, is it start playing again on the new page?
Yeah. Yes.
And it has all of its state. It's conceptual as if it was in a layout. And maybe this we can get into like this. This is the React part of it, but
right. So again, I'm doing like the SPA version here. So it would be like in if you're writing React, it would be like if your video component was unmounted and then remounted in your new page, view transitions like they can say like they know that that's the element, but they can't like put the video back into a playing state. That would be like up to you. But for a React app, if you're building like a picture-in-picture video player, you would have that player rendered up high in the tree, like somewhere in the root layout, so it wouldn't mount and unmount. And in that case, the video player would maintain all of its state. But when you're running that view transition, even though the video would be quote-unquote playing still, because you're starting the view transition, you're starting off with a screenshot. So it would appear as if it was paused.
Interesting.
So,
I really want to play with this.
They are very, very cool. So they have a bunch of this video player. They have a bunch of examples where they talk like, okay, here's how you can make it look like it's playing. They even call out though, which I think is nice. They call it that you probably didn't notice it paused if the animation is fast enough. But they do show examples of like how to deal with this. Anyway, before we go,
so that's the answer. Before you go on, that's the answer to the question of you do want to think of it like inert, basically. The reason I was confused about that is like if you wanted to do things like we've seen in the frame of motion demos where you have like part of a page that's like mapping to a new place, like it's the same element on the new page, and you want it to like go to it, and you want the rest to fade out. If it's a screenshot, like that would be hard to do, right? Like you can't like
no, you can. I'm doing that in my animations. You can.
So it's not a screenshot. It is.
You would think
it's
of
an
it
inert
as
DOM snapshot. Like it's a DOM snapshot. But you can still like write an animation that like picks apart the elements of the tree.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
You can think about it as a screenshot of each of those elements. So if you wanted to fade out the page, but then slide two photos to like different corners of the screen, you can think of that as like 3 different screenshots. A screenshot for each of the photos, and then like a screenshot for the page.
Okay, that makes sense.
each of those things in that situation would have its own view transition ID. And then in CSS, you could style the animation for each of those IDs. So you'd have like photo 1, photo 2, and then root. Root is, they have a default view transition, which is root, and that's like the entire page.
Okay. So if you want to apply different CSS to different parts of the transitioning page or the whole tree, you need to mark that each one with a view transition ID. And how do you do that again? What is the actual way you do that?
I think it's like a CSS property.
The pseudo selector, like colon, colon.
No. It's like a CSS property, view transition name, and then a value. So you know how you do like border 1px solid red, it'd be view transition name, header.
Got you.
And if that element exists in both the pages between the view transition, then you can apply an animation to between both the pages.
Okay, cool. So keep going with like the use cases that you're working on, because I'm like I'm going to pull up the API just to like see it, because I'm having a hard time like understanding how you would like connect a photo from the before and after. But why don't you keep going and talk about like this? Yeah.
And we can go into that. So I'm building a photo gallery. So you have a bunch of photos. You go to a screen and it's like open a gallery. I have like pictures of New York, pictures of cars, pictures of mountains. And then you click on one of those and like the photos kind of explode out. And then you're in a gallery showing each of the photos. And then you can click on a photo in the gallery to like make it larger. And every one of those transitions there is going to be using a view transition.
Should we, are you okay if we link that as part of the show notes of the episode, just so people can click around it?
Yeah, that would be great, because I have been wasting a lot of time doing really dumb stuff, and I would love to get to a point where I can ship this. So this would be a good motivation for me to like just like publish this thing, because I've rewritten this like 4 or 5 times, just playing with different things. To talk about like how do you animate across pages. When you start a view transition, you take that snapshot and you're going to have like element with view transition name, and it's going to be like photo 1. And then when the view transition finishes, you're going to already have updated the DOM, and you're going to have an element in that update with a view transition name of photo 1, but it's going to be in a different spot. Like, let's just say it moved across the screen. And the view transition by default is going to know to move that element from like the screenshot snapshot to its new position. So you're just going to get a move of that
by default without you doing anything, just by the virtue of having marked it with the same ID and calling start view transition or something.
Yeah, the same name and calling start view transition. Yep. That's
wow.
Yep. And then you can apply your own CSS animations to change that. So you can add animation delay or animation timing or animation duration to slow it down, to change the curve, and all that stuff.
I see. Okay, I'm seeing the API now in the document. So the view transition name is a CSS property. So it's a property. Because I was trying to understand like what the Tailwind utility would do, but it's
let's not the Tailwind. I looked for the Tailwind. Don't try to map this to Tailwind.
Yeah.
It's going to get way too gnarly. So I think it's better.
I thought when you were saying board or something, you were mentioning Tailwind, but you were just saying, okay, so you just add a view transition name CSS property, kind of like you can use content. You could say content : as a CSS property and put content in like a before pseudo element or after pseudo element. Sometimes people do that for like tooltips and stuff. If you've ever seen like and : before and content. Anyways, I'm just explaining the API because I didn't understand it originally, but it's a CSS property that is set. And so here they have view transition name figure caption. And then why don't you talk about what do you actually do to call that? And maybe we can talk about like in your React app, how do you actually do that?
Yep. So there's an API called startTransition, and if you just call start transition, and it works a lot like React transitions, which is really nice because when you have that mental model down, it's very, very nice. StartViewTransition takes a callback function, and inside that callback function, you update the DOM. And how you update the DOM, that's up to your framework. That's up to what library you're using. So React is going to do something, in React, it would be like set state, right? It would be something like that. You need to change the DOM. And then you close the callback function. And at that point, they do the snapshot, update the DOM underneath the snapshot, and then transition between the snapshot and the live view. So startViewTransition is kind of like the entry point API into this. I should say too that, like, I probably didn't explain this in the beginning. If you don't call startViewTransition, you won't have animations. So you need to make sure you have to call startViewTransition.
Okay, that was my other question. So, like, just thinking vanilla here, if you add like view transition name, is it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And if you were to add that to like the body tag and just like navigate, nothing would happen.
So I think in the MPA world, if you opt into this, all your navigations are going to use this. But we're just going to stay in the SPA world for now.
Yeah. Yep.
So in the SPA world, you're not really navigating; you're updating the DOM.
Right.
And
I see. And so if you don't call start view transition, then it won't do anything because the browser doesn't know if it's started or ended. It doesn't. Yeah.
And also too, like, the browser just doesn't want to say that, like, oh, every time you do inner HTML, I now need to do a view transition, right? So so it's start view transition, and then inside of start view transition, you update the DOM. How you update the DOM could be document.innerHTML. It could be calling like set state if you're using React. It's whatever your library or framework, how it manages the DOM.
Okay, cool.
So let's talk about, like, when you're in the middle of a view transition and you have that snapshot overlaid on top of the live page, you have these pseudo selectors at the root of your document. So they're going to be like view transition and the name of the view transition. So, I was using like header or photo one as an example before. And then underneath those, you're going to have like, there's like a group. And then underneath the group, there's a few other elements. There's like image pair,
group,
but like
image pair,
and then old
and new.
And new. But let's just focus on like group and old and new.
Mm-hmm.
The old element is going to be that snapshot on top, and the new element is going to be the thing from the new page. And a really cool thing about this is that if you don't have a new element, then if you don't have a new element, so the view transition name exists in the old view, but not the new view, you're not going to have that new pseudo class. So it's really hard to like to talk about this, but you have like a DOM tree that's attached to the root HTML element, and it's done through pseudo classes. And those pseudo classes are going to have the name of your view transition, and then like a new, and then an old. And the new one is the thing from the new page. The old one is the thing from the old page. So you can imagine if you have a header, that's going to exist on every single page as you click around. So there's always going to be a new header and an old header. But you can imagine if you have like photo one, that might not exist on every page.
Right.
So as you click around, if you're going to a page that has photo one from a page that doesn't have photo one, you'll have like a new photo one, but you won't have an old photo one.
Okay.
And vice versa. So you can do like CSS selectors to do entry and exit animations. So you can say, if I have a photo one, a view transition of photo one, that's the only child, a new view transition of photo one, that's the only child, I know that it's an entry animation. I know it didn't exist on the old page and it does exist on the new page. And then you can in that CSS selector that's like literally : only child, you can style photo one's entry animation.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. And then you can do the opposite for exit, and
for
that's and then
exit.
if they're both there, you get the update, because that's what I
Yeah.
was confused about. How do you distinguish the update from the other two?
I don't know. Maybe there's like a CSS selector. Like I was trying to do it with has and it didn't work. And I found something that was like has with pseudo selectors. Like there might be some limitations, but you can do only child on new to know it's new, only
Right.
child on old to know that it's an exit. It'd be nice if there was a way to say that what is like the selector look like for it's like there is a old and there is a new. And I don't know how to write that, but maybe
No,
someone
you
that's
should be
better
able
at
to.
CSS does.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
I
definitely should be
couldn't
able to.
I couldn't figure it out. I was trying a bunch of things and
Okay, interesting. So you weren't able to specifically change the animation for the update case.
so no, what I do is I define the update case and then I override only child new will
For
override it and then only
Okay.
child old overrides. So
Oh,
yeah.
okay. How do you define the up? How do you define the main one, the base one? That's just like the base, whatever the base way to do it
So
is.
there's an element called like view transition name group, and that group
Okay.
is a container of both old and new, and you
Gotcha.
can apply animations to that group. So if you did like animation duration 5 seconds, and the element existed on both pages, that group would take 5 seconds to animate.
Okay.
So you
Okay.
would see that group. In the case of a photo gallery, you'd see that photo move across the screen. Yeah, group contains its old and new.
Okay. Got you. Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's one of these things like when you hear people talk about it or you read the docs, you're just like, this. It sounds weird. But the API is awesome. It is awesome.
Why don't you talk about some of the things about the API that you liked, and like some of the surprising things you were saying? It was surprising how well it worked with React.
Yeah. So when you do I talked about how you do like start view transition and then you update the DOM. And when that view transition finishes, you're going to go paint between the old and the new. That start view transition function can return a promise.
I was going to ask that.
And in that you can take that promise and the view transition won't start is a wrong word because you've already started the view transition, but that view transition won't apply its animation until you fulfill that promise. So you can take that promise and you can hold on to it, and then you can trigger when the animation should happen. So there's a really cool thing with React here is that you can take that start a view transition, start a React transition, take that promise, create a new promise in your view transition, take that promise and set it in some state. And then right next to that, navigate to the new page. Like call navigate. So like in Next.js, this would be like router.push, use some navigation API. And you set that view transition promise in React state. And then you have an effect that basically when it renders, it fulfills that promise. It resolves that promise. There's a really cool thing here is because you started a navigate and setting that promise and both React in the same React transition, that state update for that promise will not appear until the navigation is finished. This is like a real key point. So let's spend some time on this.
Yeah. So right now, navigate doesn't like return a promise or whatever, so you can't like await it. But it's within it does use React transitions. Let's just talk about next to keep it simple, because I think that's what I'm familiar with. So normally you would start. This is transition inception going on here. Normally you start a transition when you click on a link, and let's say that transition that you navigate to page 2. Page 2 is a server component. It's asynchronous, and it's fetching data. And so it's going to fetch the data for post 2, but your app, your UI will stay in the current post 1 until that's ready. That's what is React is transitioning is doing for you. That's what React transitions are doing for you, right? Mm-hmm. They show the old state because this is a low priority update, but it's taking time. And so we wait, we prepare the next page. Again, sounds a lot like view transitions. But we prepare the next page, and once it's ready, then we flip over to it. Now you're saying we need a promise that resolves when that thing is ready.
Wait, let's before we go to there, let's just add in one more layer. So I start a transition, and we're going to use next here. So we're going to say I'm calling rudder.push. And in that transition, you won't see the UI update until the page is fully ready to render. I'm going to add one more thing into this transition. I'm going to create a new piece of state called name. And inside that same transition, I'm going to set name from, it's like Sam right now, and I'm going to set it to Ryan. Because that set state is wrapped in a transition that also contains a rudder.push, which under the hood, rudder.push has a set state under it. Even though my name change from Sam to Ryan is synchronous and can just like be applied right now, because it's grouped in the same transition as a rudder.push, it will not show up until the rudder.push is ready. So it's a way for you to like batch state updates, some that take different amounts of time.
Yep. Perfect. That makes sense. And this is like a tricky thing, especially with server actions, because people start making like server action mutations. Just as a little aside, just if in case you are experimenting with these server actions, you make an await and then you try to set some result and then you do another wait and you're not seeing anything. The whole point is like this coordination problem. You're trying to coordinate like local state, synchronous state updates with like remote data stuff, things that take time. So, okay. So even though we don't have to wait on the network or any asynchronous function for Ryan, it doesn't show up until the asynchronous server component has loaded post 2, right?
Right.
And then once all of that is done, React will update the UI with post 2. And so now the problem, if you were to just wrap all of that, let me see if I get this right. If you were to wrap both of those things into startViewTransition, they'd be done immediately, basically, from the perspective of the callback function, because the callback function needs to be a promise, which is like the way we tell things take time in JavaScript. But both of those things happen not to return promises. Now, as I pointed out in my React Conf talk, you can pass an asynchronous function to start transition, but you can also have this case that you're describing where you navigate and you do some, and the navigation triggers a render that suspends, right? So
exactly.
Point
so
being,
there's no
promise. So basically, you can have a React transitions are they are a superset of like asynchronous code that sometimes is represented with like a literal async function you pass in, but sometimes isn't, right? If the set state causes a render that suspends, which is the only transition that we had for a long time in React. So I almost wonder if this would be easier if I was like breaking this down. The easiest thing might be like the asynchronous, like a server action, because usually those are awaited. But anyways, let's take this case. So you're trying to add view transitions to your next app. You have this situation. How do you get a promise that you can pass off and return from your callback? So what you do is you create a new promise. You put it on state so that the new version of the app will have access to it. It's going to be in both the old version and the new version. So it needs to be in state. And the act of rendering the new page is basically going to use an effect that's going to resolve the promise.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then at that point, so React has done the first kind of version of like the background preparation, and it's done all of its stuff, and it's fully interruptible. It can discard those things, blah blah blah. And once it prepares it, it's going to say, I'm going to commit it to the screen. But because we're actually in a start view transition that has a promise that hasn't resolved, like the browser has a screenshot that is like on top of our updated React app.
Exactly.
That's crazy. And then you have a final thing that's like, I'm ready. It's like a way to tell the browser that you're ready.
Exactly.
And then you just do your view transition. So
exactly.
And that would work.
And it is.
And it's cool because the promise is what links the React transition to the view transition. And a promise is going to be something that every framework has access to. Every SP, every client JavaScript framework has access to do.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's really, really cool that
Pretty fascinating.
You're basically creating two transitions. The first is a view transition, which is going to freeze the screen, put the screenshot on top. And now it's like, okay, guys, we got a screenshot on top of us. Like, let's get to work. It's almost like a little construction site that's doing all this work while there's a screenshot on top of you. And so what's the work that needs to be done? Excuse me. So what's the work that needs to be done? It's starting a React transition. You start a React transition to navigate to this new page. That might take time, might trigger some suspense boundaries, whatever. It doesn't matter. There's just a whole bunch of work going on underneath the screenshot. And when that navigation finishes, you set state. You set state with that transition. When the navigation finishes, all the effects are going to run, and you have an effect that resolves that promise. And that is now going to remove the screenshot,
right, and
reveal the content that was underneath that because you did all this work and the React transition is fully ready. Yeah. So it's
I have a question. Cool. That's very cool. I have a question. What if you try to interrupt your React transition? If you're sitting there staring at a screenshot, is your app still interactive?
So I have been. This is another answer I've been trying to find. From what I can tell, it's not, but you can cancel the view transition. So I have to spend more time with this. But once you throw that screenshot on top, like if I like add like a animation duration of 10 seconds and I throw that screenshot on top, I have not been able to cancel it. But like I think you can still like detect mouse clicks and stuff. So I'm not,
because this is a big part of the design of React transitions, is to make sure the current UI is fully interactive. It's actually something that I miss in my demo, my live coding demo, that when you're increasing the cart count, you can still flip the panel on and off. And sometimes you might be doing something that takes precedence over the currently pending transition, making it like, it folds it up and it's not there anymore or whatever, or it cancels it, right? So right. you would want that to ultimately to work with it. I was just thinking it's actually pretty cool if you could just throw a screenshot up and make the app inert. Like, when airplane websites tell you not to reload the page.
Yeah.
it's sometimes you want to just freeze like their computer. Like iOS does this,
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I would like to hear more. I think this falls under, for me, it's like animation best practices and like how the view transition people want you to think about these sort of things. Because like I said, if I start view transition outside of React, just any old view transition, and it has an animation duration of 10 seconds, you have that inert thing on top, and it's not. The video player is a good example. It pauses.
Right.
So I think they have some tricks for how to deal with this. I don't think this is. I don't know the answer, but I think there's some ways to deal with this. For my React app, while you're running the transition, while you're running the view transition, it is not interruptible. But I have all my animations are 150 milliseconds. So if you're able to interrupt that, you deserve a prize.
No, but it's not about that's okay. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. It's not about the fact that the animation is not interruptible. It's about the fact that when I click a link, I'm going to start a view transition, and then I'm going to router.push to page 2. Page 2 could take 300 milliseconds to load.
Right,
and then once it's ready, you kick off the transitions. So it's the 300 millisecond part I'm asking about. That's not.
Yep.
So it's not that it's still like inert, right?
Right. And we can take it to extreme. It takes like 5 seconds to load, and
Right.
you don't want your app to be frozen for 5 seconds.
Right.
The way I don't know the answer to that. I would be surprised if there wasn't a way to deal with it, but it's not a problem I have. So
Yeah, that's good.
I can down the road.
That's good. The way I would think about solving this, if I just, my first reaction, my first instinct here would be you start your transition and you actually wait for the promise. You actually get a promise for your transition the same way you did. And there's basically like a step 1 and a step 2. And the step 1, you do the effect thing. And the effect thing lets this promise know that the new page is ready. So the React transition is done. At that point, you call start transition. You call start view transition. And then on like a next tick or something, you resolve it. So the start view transition actually is only happening really quickly at the end of the React transition. That way, if you had a React transition kicked off, you would have a fully interactive app because you really only want it at the end of the transition.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but I think there might be an easier way to do that. I don't think you have to go into like that, like galaxy brain mode, because, and the reason I think this is because like you can imagine like if Wikipedia and MPA app added view transitions, clicking a link shouldn't.
Yeah, it shouldn't
freeze the page. And this is something that, so like, I don't know like where, how to think about this when you're doing like an SPA like React that has its own transitions, but there has to be some way to tap into
to cancel it, basically. To cancel it.
Yeah, or to what you're saying is like not overlay that screenshot and then pause the world until React is ready. So
exactly.
But again, this is I think this is like outside, for sure, outside of like the demo I've been doing. So
that's cool, man.
Yeah,
dude, I want to see it. I'm excited to take a look at it.
Yeah. Again, it's so cool that the browser is getting these APIs, and how well or how fun it is to use it with React.
I know you said that you think it's gonna replace a lot of your use of like React specific libraries, things like Framer Motion, or you could see it doing that. You know what I mean? Because it's like we didn't install Axios to make network requests. We just use Fetch, you know? Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to happen like next week. There's this thing that's like interrupt. Have you heard of this? That's like interrupt 2024. They do one every year. It's basically like all the APIs of browsers all like, I guess, agree on committing to supporting. And view transitions isn't in that. So we'd have to wait till, 2025 or whatever. And when you look at like the interop stuff, it's stuff that like, they're not like groundbreaking new things. It's just all the browsers
like
getting on the same
Flexbox,
page
like
about
every
browser
version of the Flexbox property.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that. Yeah.
Exactly. I think like Safari has view transitions in a technical preview, which is a pretty good sign. But I searched like a whole bunch for Safari and view transitions, and I couldn't find. All I found was like this little note about that it's in a technical preview, which is like their beta release of the Safari browser. So
which browsers have it right now? Just Chrome?
Chrome, but then all the Chrome offshoots. So I think the Edge The Edge Microsoft one is Chromium based. Brave is Chromium based. So anything that's Chromium will have support for it. So yeah, I wouldn't hold your breath for this sort of thing. Like definitely go to the animation libraries like Framer Motion if you need these today. But yeah, I think it's super cool. Especially like, dude, when I get that only child CSS selector working, I was like, this is such a beautiful way to do entry and exit animations. It's just so beautiful. Oh yeah, just one more thing that I should have called out. Because these are CSS animations, you get to use Chrome DevTools animations tab.
That's cool.
You can scrub. They have like this awesome UI for like scrubbing the animation timeline. So you can just go back and forth. They literally draw like the curves of how fast things are moving and where they are, like the easing functions. They have a UI for like slowing animations down to 50% or 10%. You can replay animations. So
I've seen that before because it's literally just for CSS animations. So the fact that these just happen to use it, and so you're just good to go. That's very cool.
Half the time when I'm working on this stuff, I'd like write something, and then I'd go over to that tool and start playing with it and tweaking it, and then like using that tool to find the pseudo element that's attached to that root HTML node.
Yeah.
The new and old pseudo element, and pulling that up in DevTools, inspecting that, seeing its position, where it is. So it's like you have it's like an animation library that has the full power of DevTools.
So I thought really that was awesome.
Yeah. And it's like, it just feels like you're like getting all this stuff for free. So
yeah, I think that's actually pretty underrated. Like there's been a lot of times when I've been working on Framer Motion stuff, and I love Framer Motion. And you are kind of like shooting in the dark a little bit with some of this stuff. Because you're not going to debug like a motion value. And it reminds me of when I used, Ember, and we used Ember Animated, and it was the same thing. Now, Ember Animated actually eventually added some animated tools that you could add, which was really cool. And I've wanted something like that in Framer Motion for a while, where you can just globally slow down everything or, replay it. Because it's a lot of tweaking, like doing animations is a lot more like, the video game design stuff or movie editing. You need to just play it back a bunch, and it can be hard to do that. So I think that is like actually a huge benefit, and I could see that being a reason that people reach for this a lot more,
Animations they're very visual. Like if I'm trying to decide in easing function, animation function, timing function, I like want to take my app and like render like 12 different versions of it, all with different functions, and just hit play and see which one, and like kind of like it's very visual. So
that's a good idea.
Yeah, having these visual tools,
He's got me down a recipe mental that fun demo.
I don't know the name of this website. I should find it because I always click it. But there's a it's like easings.net.
Yeah, easings.net. Yeah.
So I've been spending a lot of time on this website, and they have a bunch of you can pull up a timing function, and then you can see like how it works with size, position, transparency, and we'll link this in the show notes. But this has been, I actually spend a lot of time trying to find the right curve on this website.
That's cool.
And then bring it back in my app. But I wish I could just like use these curves in my app, because my app has different animations on this website. So
yep.
Yeah.
That's neat. So, very cool, man. I'm excited to hear that you're getting into that stuff. Just for the listeners, and if in case you didn't know too, like the ease option on Framer Motion elements is the same as this one. So and you can put a cubic Bezier curve in there too, which is really nice, and that's like pretty powerful. I always look, what I always look at for really good easing Bezier curves is
Apple.
No, well, they don't really expose them. At least I don't know if they do, but that Ionic framework library that like recreated all of theirs. Their code is super clean. And if you ever like find something you like there, like a card sliding up, just go to the card, iOS enter, iOS exit. It's going to be a Bezier curve, and you can bring it in to anything. So
How do you
might look at that
that
for
curve?
like, no, it's going to be, it's in
Like,
the
do you use
code.
DevTools?
No,
So
I
you
just
use
go to
DevTools, or-
no, I go to GitHub. I just go to GitHub. It's an open source
okay,
framework. Ionic framework is open source. So you go to ionicframework.com, you go to components. Like, let's see if they have like a photo thing. And like the weight, basically it's something similar to like the weight, the mass, the stiffness of like a photo when you're kind of swiping it. Maybe it would be like a card or something that can. And if you find something that does that, then action sheet, for example, I've used that a lot, right? So the action sheet just looks awesome. Like if you go, you see this thing? It looks so good. It's the curve on the enter and exit. They're a little bit different. And they have a little GitHub thing right here that you can click to and find the source. And yeah, in the animations file in the GitHub repo for Ionic Framework, you can find the curves for all these. So I would suggest trying that. I bet that would look dope with some of the view transitions.
Nice. Well, absolutely give that a shot. Yep.
That was fun, man. I'm happy to hear about it. We're gonna have to get you to publish this thing so we can take a look at it just for fun, because that'll get me to take a look. I'm curious if other people have been trying this out with React and what they think of it, compared to other stuff we have like Framer Motion, and if it solves different problems. I mean, Framer Motion is basically in the same boat you were describing, which is like there is no first class way to do this in React. There's no way to stop a component from unmounting, right? I think I was talking about this with like Ricky at ReactConf, where suspense is a way to say I'm not ready to be mounted yet. Why can't we have like I'm not ready to be unmounted yet? And that feels like it would solve a lot of this stuff for the animation libraries like Framer Motion. But this is like another way to think about it. So
yeah. Also, if you want to play with this and you're using a Next app, Shu wrote, we'll put this in the show notes. He wrote this Next View Transitions. And the source code is awesome. It's where I got like a lot of the ideas for everything we talked about. So the source code for this is definitely worth reading.
Nice. Great recommendation. Cool, man. Well, why don't we wrap it there?
Cool.
Got Bozeman on tomorrow, Friday, Saturday. So if you're at Big Sky DevCon, hopefully we got to see you. I got to see you. And we'll be back next week. Next week we got a full week. We're done traveling. I'm excited for that, man. So talk about some more stuff that's been on our minds that we've been working on. But with that, Thanks for joining, everyone. And if you have any questions, hit us up at Front and First FM on Twitter. And dude, thanks for that big talk, Ryan. That was awesome. That was like a lot of cool stuff. So yeah, that's it. And we'll see you next week.
See ya.
Bye.